They always said we were a team, a family. That word used to mean something to me. It meant warmth, trust, late-night laughter echoing through thin walls, and the comfort of knowing someone would catch you if you fell. But somewhere along the way, that word lost its meaning, and I lost everything. I was 26 when I moved back home. Not because I failed, but because I was saving every cent to buy my first apartment. I cooked, cleaned, paid rent, even though they never asked, and stacked away every extra dollar I could from my 2 jobs. My savings account became sacred to me. It represented freedom, independence, my future. But to them, it was just another resource, another thing they could quietly take, without asking. The first time they dipped into it, my mother called it a mistake, said she thought it was the joint account. I wanted to believe her, but it wasn't joint. It had never been joint, and that was just the beginning. Weeks later, my brother needed help, a small loan to fix his car and keep his job. He promised he'd pay me back within the month. I believed him. I wanted to believe in them, but that loan turned into silence, then excuses, then gaslighting. "You're being selfish," my sister snapped one day. "It's just money. Families help each other." But no one had asked me. No one had included me. I wasn't helping, I was being drained, and I started to realize something bone deep and painful. I was never seen as a daughter or a sister. I was a walking ATM, a backup plan. And worse, they didn't even feel bad about it. The moment that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. I checked my balance. Gone. Every last dollar. Years of sacrifice. Erased. And in that instant, something inside me snapped. Not out of rage, but out of clarity. I wasn't going to cry this time. I was going to calculate, quietly, precisely, and I was going to take back what was mine. Not just in cash, but in power. After the shock wore off, I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I just sat with the silence, letting it stretch around me like armor. Every breath I took felt heavier, as if the betrayal had weight. But the more I thought about it, the clearer things became. This wasn't an accident. It was planned, rehearsed, executed. Like a slow leak in a tire, they deflated me, hoping I wouldn't notice until I couldn't move. I combed through every transaction, transfers, withdrawals, payments to accounts I didn't recognize, and one name kept appearing, our parents' mortgage company. At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. But no. They weren't just stealing from me. They were using my savings to pay their bills. And it had been happening for months. Not once did they ask. Not once did they say, "Thank you." The irony, I was sleeping on a couch in the living room. No privacy, no comfort. They had taken my money to protect their home, while I didn't even have a room to call mine. And somehow, they still acted like they were doing me a favor. The emotional gaslighting was relentless. "We all make sacrifices. We're just trying to survive. You'll thank us one day." But I didn't feel grateful. I felt used. I felt like a stranger in my own family. And worse, I realized I had been raised to believe that loyalty meant silence, that good daughters don't question, that family always comes first, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. So, I started pretending, smiling, nodding, playing the obedient daughter they expected, because while they were busy underestimating me, I was gathering information, bank statements, loan documents, anything with my name on it that had been used without permission. I wasn't just going to get mad, I was going to get even. And for that, I needed proof. I spent the next 2 weeks turning into someone I barely recognized, quiet, calculating, unshakably calm. Every spare moment, I researched. I learned things I never thought I'd need to know: property law, financial fraud, civil claims. I wasn't looking for revenge yet. Not the dramatic, explosive kind. What I wanted was leverage, power, something no one could take from me again. One night, while sorting through a pile of unpaid bills stuffed in a drawer by the front door, I found a folder, yellowed, stained, and marked private. And in that folder was the key, the deed to the house, my parents' house, the one they claimed was fully paid off. But the reality? They had refinanced it twice over the past 5 years, and this time, they used my name as a cosigner without telling me. That's when everything changed. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was legally tied to their debt. If they defaulted, I'd be responsible, and that, somehow, made me both furious and crystal clear. I had a path now, a legal one. They thought I was just a girl with hurt feelings, but now I was a stakeholder, a quiet owner of their most valuable possession, and they had handed me that power in their own desperation. Still, I didn't speak. I smiled through dinner, listened to my brother complain about gas prices while sipping the soda I paid for. I nodded at my mother's passive-aggressive comments about kids these days and entitlement, and inside, I made a decision. I would not scream. I would not argue. I would take the house, piece by piece, legally, silently, and with the same ease they showed when they took everything from me. Once I had the deed and the paperwork in hand, my nights changed. I wasn't just researching anymore, I was acting, quietly, precisely. I visited the county clerk's office and confirmed what I feared. My signature had been forged on several documents. But even more shocking, those documents had already given me partial ownership. They needed me to get the loan, and they got greedy, sloppy, desperate. I consulted a lawyer, not a flashy one, just someone who knew real estate law and could speak plainly. I handed over everything, every paper, every withdrawal slip, every receipt, and when he looked up at me across that cheap laminated desk and said, "You know you could take the house," I felt it, that still, quiet click of power returning to me. Not revenge, control. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had a choice again. Back at home, things carried on as usual. My dad blamed me for leaving the porch light on. My mom asked for a little help with groceries again. My siblings made comments about how lucky I was to live rent-free, and I just smiled. Because they had no idea the foundation beneath their feet was already shifting, and I was the one holding the ground. They thought silence meant surrender, but mine was strategic. My stillness was movement. And soon, they'd learn the difference between support and sacrifice, between loyalty and theft. It's wild how people who take everything from you still expect more. That week, my mom asked for help with her credit card bill. My brother wanted to borrow my car. My sister rolled her eyes when I said I had plans and couldn't babysit. Every single favor came laced with guilt, like I owed them for simply existing. And for years, I had believed that. But now, I saw it clearly. This wasn't help. It was control disguised as love. They had conditioned me to feel responsible for their mistakes, to sacrifice what I wanted so they could feel comfortable. But that comfort came at my cost, financially, emotionally, mentally, and I was done paying interest on a debt I never agreed to carry. One evening, I stood in the hallway and watched them laugh together in the living room. For a moment, I felt like a ghost, like I was just the background to their lives, the one who worked 2 jobs so they could keep pretending nothing was wrong. But this ghost was about to become something else entirely, the owner. They just didn't know it yet. I filed the papers 2 days later. Quietly, cleanly. I paid the small legal fee out of the last few $100s I had, and just like that, the transfer was in motion. In a few weeks, the house would be mine. Legally, completely. And there would be no screaming, no drama, just facts, signatures, and silence. If this story is hitting close to home, subscribe and leave a like. Stories like this deserve to be heard, and you help make that happen. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I just needed them to feel what I had felt. Powerless, dismissed, replaced, and the only way to make them see that was by showing them what life looked like without my sacrifice propping them up. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon. A simple white envelope slipped into the mailbox, addressed to the house, not to me. Inside was the official notice of ownership transfer. It was clean, final, legal. My name printed clearly on the top, sole owner of record. I held it in my hands like a quiet thunderclap. This was it, the moment my silence turned into substance. I didn't say a word. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter, just like all the other mail they never bothered to check. But when my father opened it later that evening, the shift was immediate. He read it once, then again. And then he called my mother into the room. Her face tightened. My brother stood up. My sister stopped scrolling her phone. And in that eerie silence, they all turned to look at me. "What is this?" my dad asked, voice low, shaking with the kind of panic he wasn't used to feeling. I just smiled. "It's what you gave me. You just didn't realize it." They erupted. Accusations, screaming, guilt trips. My mom cried. My brother called me a traitor. My sister said I was destroying the family. And I said nothing. Because for once, I didn't owe them an explanation. They had spent years taking from me behind my back. And now that I had taken something back, in daylight, with my name on it, they couldn't stand it. They weren't angry that I had done something wrong. They were angry that I had stopped letting them. That night, no one slept. They slammed doors, whispered in corners, paced the kitchen floor like it would undo the paper I had already signed. My dad threatened to take me to court. My mom said I was mentally unstable. My brother started ranting about how blood should mean something. And my sister, of course, called me a gold digger. It was a circus of panic, and every performer was desperate to rewrite the script, but I had already turned the final page. The next morning, my father cornered me in the hallway. His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. "You're going to reverse this," he said, as if his words carried the weight of law. "You're not going to humiliate this family over a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That's what he called years of theft, silence, and lies. "I didn't humiliate this family," I told him. "You did that when you forged my name." He went quiet. For the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't pride, or disappointment, or control. It was fear, not of me, but of what he had created. A daughter who no longer needed permission to protect herself. That weekend, they tried everything: guilt, charm, manipulation. But I had built a fortress now, brick by brick, with every withdrawal they made behind my back. And that house, it wasn't just real estate anymore. It was proof of survival, of strength, of what happens when the quiet one finally speaks, with actions. I waited exactly 1 week, gave them time to cool off, to reflect, to maybe even apologize. But instead, they acted like nothing had happened, except colder, sharper. My mom avoided eye contact. My dad stopped speaking to me altogether. My siblings tiptoed around, throwing glances like daggers. They were hoping I'd cave, that the tension would break me. But I didn't break. I packed, room by room. I boxed up their comfort, quietly. I hired a real estate agent. I scheduled a meeting with a property lawyer. And I began the legal process of eviction. Because the truth was brutal but simple. They no longer lived in a home. They lived in my house. And while they had taught me nothing about fairness, they taught me everything about what happens when someone overplays their hand. The night before the notice was served, I sat in my car across the street and watched the house glow from the inside. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. They'd used me like a resource, drained me like a lifeline. But lifelines can snap, and when they do, no one hears the silence until it's too late. The papers were delivered the next morning. My mother called me first, her voice shaking. "You're really going to do this to your own family?" And I said the words I had waited years to speak. "You did this. I'm just finishing what you started." They had 30 days. 30 days to leave the house they'd always assumed would be theirs forever. And in those 30 days, the energy shifted entirely. The arrogance drained from their voices. My father avoided the mail. My mother started crying at the smallest things. My brother cursed under his breath every time I entered a room. But no one apologized. Not once. That silence told me everything I needed to know about who they really were. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just kept packing. The process was mechanical, but the emotions came in waves. This wasn't just about a house. It was about everything they took. The birthdays I skipped to work overtime, the dreams I delayed to help them, the quiet way I disappeared every time they needed something louder than my boundaries. But as I labeled each box, It felt like I was finally unpacking myself. One night, my sister came to my room. She didn't say much, just stood in the doorway holding an old photo of us as kids. "You really want to erase us," she whispered. I looked her in the eye and said, "You erased me the moment you chose to take instead of ask." She didn't answer, just turned and walked away, and in that moment, I didn't feel like the villain they wanted me to be. I felt free, because I wasn't erasing them, I was releasing myself. It rained that morning. Fitting, somehow. The skies were gray, heavy, like they, too, were holding back everything unsaid. I stood at the window with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, watching as my father loaded the last of the boxes into the back of his truck. My mother clutched a coat she hadn't worn in years, her eyes hollow. My siblings didn't look back once. They didn't speak to me. Not a word. Not even a final glance. And that silence, it didn't hurt. It confirmed everything. They had never seen me, not truly. I had always just been the fixer, the provider, the dependable one. The background character in a family drama where they were always the stars, but not today. Today, the credits were rolling, and I had rewritten the final scene. As the truck pulled away, I didn't cry, I didn't celebrate, I just walked back into the empty house, closed the door, and stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet. It was the first time in years the silence felt like mine. I walked into every room, one by one, touched the walls, opened the windows. Let the air change. This place had been soaked in entitlement, manipulation, and guilt. But now, it was being emptied, cleansed, reclaimed, by me. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I was seeking restoration, and this was just the beginning. In the days that followed, the house felt massive, not in size, but in possibility. Every corner that once whispered memories of servitude now echoed with freedom. I painted the walls, ripped out the carpets, threw away every relic of guilt and control they had left behind. Not out of spite, but because I needed to start fresh, to build something that was mine, in spirit, not just on paper. I set up a small workspace by the window where I could finally start writing again. Words poured out of me like they had been waiting their whole lives to exist. I began cooking meals just for me, sitting in silence without being interrupted, breathing without flinching. It was a kind of peace I had never known. A peace not granted, but earned. I wasn't isolated. I was healing. And in that healing, I didn't feel bitter. I felt reborn. The weight of always being the strong one had been replaced by something lighter, truth. The truth that I could stand alone and still feel whole, that I didn't need to sacrifice myself to prove love. That sometimes, walking away is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. They stopped contacting me. No calls, no texts, no apologies, and that was fine. Because forgiveness didn't need to begin with them, it began with me. And every small act of rebuilding was a declaration. I am not what they reduced me to. I am everything they feared I'd become if I ever chose myself. Months passed. The seasons changed, and with them, so did I. What once was a house soaked in guilt had become a sanctuary of self-respect. There were no more raised voices, no passive-aggressive comments, no expectations hanging over my head like a storm cloud, just me, the walls I owned, and the peace I had carved out of chaos. One afternoon, a letter arrived, postmarked with my parents' new address. I opened it slowly, expecting venom, but it was short, almost pitiful. My mother's handwriting, shaky and unfamiliar. "We didn't realize how much we hurt you, but you hurt us too." That was it. No apology. No ownership. Just a guilt-laced attempt at rewriting the past. I folded the letter, set it on fire in the kitchen sink, and watched the ashes swirl upward like everything I had once buried. And then, silence again. But this time, it roared with meaning. I didn't need revenge that screamed. I didn't need confrontation. My revenge was living well. My revenge was owning the house they once used to hold over my head. My revenge was the woman I had become, sharp, fearless, and whole. They took my savings. I took the deed. And in that transaction, I didn't just take back what was mine. I became someone they could never use again. Thanks for watching until the end. If you've lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next silent revenge. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest scream.